if we actually end up at something where some amount of like authentic humanity remains in the soup of whatever business looks like, I think that will be a good thing.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
Hi, this is Jody. Before we get on to the episode, just a quick note about the audio. I wish I could pretend that because we had a quote in last week's episode about messy good enough being the new excellence, that we somehow decided to demonstrate that in this week's episode, but no. We're still figuring this all out, how to record from home, so bear with us with a little messy good enough for this week.
Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And we are recording from not our brand new, just set up, finally perfected the sound of studio.
With green screens and lights and all that. No, we are not.
Not that. We are recording from, so I'm in my bedroom at my house in Towson, Maryland. And where are you, Elliot?
I am in Loganville, just south of York, PA, from the room that is described on the blueprint as office, but has up until recently been storage room.
Is that your junk room?
Yes, it had been junk room. You can see in the background there's this box that has a drone from it over.
That.
Yeah,
I see things, but your junk room is far less chock full than my junk room.
Oh no, well the camera is angled differently. Yes, but
fair enough. Anyway, most especially based on what this episode ends up being about, this is a deeply sincere invitation to, at the very least, go like our Facebook page. So Here's My Story, or jump into the group, because we are absolutely, without fail, going to be starting to do some group Zoom calls or Facebook Lives. I don't know what platform we're using, but point being, more now than ever. Oh, dear.
That works.
More than ever, we want this to be a conversation. And not just one that goes from us in your direction, but we want to hear your voices and your thoughts and your stories, because business is a human experience. And that's what today's story is about.
You ready?
Off we go. So here's my story. I was on a Zoom call, which is not surprising. I think every story from this past week for everyone who's in any kind of business probably starts with, I was on a Zoom call today.
We can actually rename the podcast. So I was on a Zoom call.
Right. So here's my Zoom call.
Yes.
I was on a Zoom call earlier today. And as you know, like I've been using Zoom for several years. Like I do my roundtables on Zoom. So I've been using them for a while. And so it's not completely foreign to me. But this morning I was on one, and it was so interesting because it was on a leadership team that I facilitate. And we're having some like somewhat serious conversations, as you can imagine. And all of a sudden, one of the guys' kids both like descend out of nowhere, you know, sort of in feral child state of pajamas and crazy hair. And they're like, and at first he tries to like completely ignore them, you know, and pretend they're not there, which was just so weird because we're all like, it's okay. Like, hey, we're all like
and you
waving
can
to
plainly see them, yes.
But literally we can see them, but he's acting like they don't exist. He's completely, and he's still just continuing to talk, but like you can tell he's like a little bit not flustered, but you know, it's just obvious. And so we all say hi and wave, and then the kids kind of go away, sort of, except they keep coming back. Like the little boy sort of just kept walking behind the dad, making this like exactly like when newscasters have that person in the background who just keeps like walking past or like walking past. Anyway, the thing that I loved about it is it was just this reminder to me, and honestly, Elliot, this is why we started this podcast, was to kind of break away these layers of what feels like nonsense around business, of like who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to act, because he was clearly upset. And while I'm sorry, upset is way too strong of a word. He was like a tiny bit flustered by it, and he was trying to look businessy. I mean, I'm projecting here. I don't know exactly what was on his thoughts, but that's kind of how it looked. And it reminded me of all the times that, like in the past, if I'm on a Zoom call or if I'm on some sort of video conference and even my internet is lagging a little bit or something, there's this weird kind of like, oh, shame upon my house for not being in a
Yes,
perfect
you're
state of everything perfect, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Which is just nonsense. And it was so interesting because it's just not how it feels now. And I find it so relieving for there to just be kind of this like relaxing of all the stuff that I've never cared about. And I feel like now the whole world's getting on board of not caring about these things. And yeah, his kids were coming through. Guess what? Half the people on the call have kids. Half like we have dogs. Like, yeah, mine weren't coming through in that moment, but they might be any second. Mine are teenagers. His are little. Mine are teenagers. I put a sign on the door that says, I'm on an important call, don't interrupt. They still walk in and then like charade mime to me about like trying to get my attention. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Are you are you not smart? Like I said, don't interrupt me. So it's just a matter of timing. And so I guess the whole point here is I am weirdly grateful for the return to humanity in business that this is providing all of us. So I don't know, is this just a me thing?
No, it really does remove a lot of the facades, or as Kevin Hart would say, the facades. Um,
Is that what Kevin Hart says?
well, Kevin Hart actually, surprisingly, I'm going to go off on a tangent. So Kevin Hart was
Tangent.
talking about how he had seen the word facade, but he had never heard it spoken. He had only read it. So he was in a movie and it was in the script. And so his line was, and this is how he said it. He said, "So I said, can't you see? It's just a facade." And the director yelled, "Cut. What did you say?" I said it was a facade. And he says, everybody's looking at me. And then they explained that it was facade, but I'd never heard the word. I
Right.
only said, so
Right.
anyway, in my house now, we just, whenever it comes
Just
up,
say
we say it's a
facade.
facade.
You know
Yeah.
what? Just as a
But
super quick side note, but it's not unrelated.
side note
I
to my
saw
tangent, is that
a
where you're going?
side note to the tangent to the sidebar of whatever. Yes. I saw this meme that said, don't ever make fun of a person for mispronouncing a word because it probably means they learned it from reading it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I thought that was such a like a deep thing of like just because the people around you didn't say that word, you learned it through reading. And I don't know, I find that
no,
important.
we were
So
talking about that
mhm.
last night because one of the kids was, I won't get into the conversation, but he was trying to figure out the strangulation. Is it Garrett or Garrot or, whatever? And I knew he knew the word, but he had just seen it because he was reading.
Mhm.
Anyway, doesn't matter. So,
My son was reading something the other day out loud to me and he said, this thing is happening in Tibet and blah, blah. And I was like, what? And then I said, oh, it's Tibet. And he got really like awkward. Like he was like, shut up, like blah, blah. I was like, no, look, I don't want you going out into the world and calling it Tibet.
particularly in
You
Tibet,
will get
apparently. Yeah.
mocked. So anyway,
Yes.
go ahead. Okay, back to
So,
just the tangent from the sidebar.
so right. So
Sidebar.
anyway, but we do have this facade that we put up, and nobody, I believe this strongly in my heart, nobody is better at facades than lawyers who really have to appear as, I write to you today as General Counsel of ABC Corporation, pursuant to the
I wish we had
correspondence that you
video
sent.
because your face just got like lawyer
Yes,
serious.
very, very lawyer serious. Well, anyway, so as a little bit of background, I had sent out emails to a number of my clients, and the emails were check-ins, and they weren't asking for business or talking about a project or doing whatever. It's just checking in. So in this 3-paragraph email to a number of them, I had said, we're doing fine. We're at home. My oldest drove across the country. He adopted a puppy on the way from a shelter in Ohio. So he came home, and there's a new puppy and all that stuff. So that is background. I got on a call with a number of them today, and there were about 4 or 5 people on the call, and we were supposed to talk about this pending acquisition. And so as we start off, and it starts off the way a lot of these calls do, not quite the I write to you today as General Counsel of ABC Corporation, but there's still that facade, that
Yeah,
seriousness about it.
yeah.
And as we were getting into it, somebody said, wait, can we see the puppy? And everybody's like, yeah,
Oh,
we want to see the puppy. So I said, okay. So I broke from the Zoom call. I came back and I showed the puppy, and everybody makes puppy appreciation noises, and then I
Right.
handed off the puppy.
You're
And we
using
went
a
on.
very cute voice. I don't think I've ever heard. Is that your puppy voice? It makes me weirdly
Oh
almost
no,
uncomfortable. Like what?
I haven't used my puppy voice yet. But um, but to your point, there's this humanity that
Yeah.
I think we're allowed to show now, because everybody knows, of course, I'm at home, as are they. I'm not. I mean, you're the only one that can see me,
Just
but
pause for 1 second. Even that part, in times past, and by that I mean 10 days ago,
yeah,
you know,
way back
if way back in
in
the
February.
last week, um, if everybody else was in their conference room and you were at home, even that was like, I mean, I didn't really have these as conscious thoughts. I'm only kind of noticing it now. Even that was slightly a little bit like, oh, I'm at home, and you sort of almost, maybe some part of you felt like you had to have a reason. I'm meeting a BGE guy or something. I'm not just goofing off. Like it's a
But
weirdly all
but
these
then
levels.
take that a little bit farther. So I'm at home. It would be weird, and I'm sitting here in my quarter zip Philmont, sweater, but it would be really weird if I appeared on the Zoom call and I was in a coat and tie,
It's
right?
super
Because they
weird.
know I'm from home. So it
Right.
would be super weird, even though that's really the expectation. If I'm the lawyer on this call about an acquisition of a company, counsel should be in this coat and tie, but now it would
I mean,
be weird.
you would never roll into their office
The
in your
way I'm dressed
fleece.
now, I've got a
No.
t-shirt under this Philmont thing, and
Yep.
yeah, and jeans on and
And
all
yet
that
it's
stuff.
like
Yeah,
goofy to get like all prepped. This
yeah.
is I am so pleased that we are having this experience, and I'm crazy curious to hear how much, not to hear, to see how much of it.
Mm,
I'm not imagining that after all this is on the other side of this, that we're all going to go to work in pajamas and,
right.
not do our hair. Not that, but will we retain, or will we suddenly like pretend all this never happened? It almost interesting. It kind of reminds me of those movies where two people who either don't know each other or maybe even hated each other in the movie or something get locked in an elevator for
Hmm.
some amount of time, and they bond and they become this like like really close about whatever happens in the moment, or and then it's over. Do they Is their relationship changed on the other side of that? From that, it's hard to imagine that it's not, but or do they just go back to pretending like they're these like distant or even
Well,
contentious people? Like,
there's that saying that I know you've seen around on the internet, that now we find out which meetings really could have been emails.
right.
Um, and you can also see, now we find out which meetings, meaning all of them, really could have been Zoom calls. Now, I don't think that we go back to no Zoom calls at all, but I do think one of the lasting ramifications is it's perfectly okay. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of inattention or laziness if you decide that, you know what, I'm going to work from home today. I'm going to telecommute in. We're going to have a Zoom call, because a lot of employers who may have been reluctant to let their workers do that, have had no choice but to see that it works,
Right.
that it can work.
Or that it doesn't. I mean, there will be some experiments in some industries, or some, as we've said in a couple of previous calls, it doesn't work for everyone all the time.
No, of
But
course not.
it is so interesting that it is stretching the bounds of what we thought was possible. It's stretching the bounds of our creativity in ways that I actually find really refreshing. I mean, people think they're being creative, but you're only ever really creative within the constructs of what you have to be creative about. I mean, you can try hard to break outside those constructs, but creativity never shows up at the level it does when you don't have other choices. Like when you
Right,
are
and
hemmed in, you get crazy creative.
right, but the other thing is, when you're talking from an organizational level, the dynamic has gone from, how do we accommodate Jody, because Jody has to work from home for whatever reason, to how do we collaborate in recreating what we're doing. It's
Right.
it's this whole crowdsourced solution,
Well, and
and
this is,
then
oh, sorry, go ahead.
you try to figure out, how can we maintain the great things about what we had when we were all together, or at least come close to them, while dealing with this new reality. And there's a whole strain of things that we can get into there, and that I think we're finding. But yeah, so go ahead.
So I think the really cool like leveling out of all this is that, and it's why I love this humanity piece. It's humanity and it's intimacy because you know you're getting to see people in their actual house. I mean, not to be weird about it, but like when I've been doing Zoom calls, I'm in my bedroom for heaven's sakes. Like usually even up until this point, because I do work from home a fair amount. I would work in my kitchen or out at our
Hmm.
big dining room table. Well, I don't want to work out there because my whole family's here and they're
Because
coming
life is
through to get.
happening out there. Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't want to say like no one's allowed in the kitchen for the next 6 hours. Like it
exactly.
doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. So my space is our bedroom, and so literally I'm talking to my clients from my bedroom, which could be weird, but I'm in a t-shirt, they're in t-shirts, and what I've loved is like sometimes I'm on calls and like the person in the room who's I don't know, I'm gonna make my like businessiest business
That
face.
is,
The
you have that
CEO,
scowl.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's I know. Those are
The
some
lines come
really
up,
deep
right? Yeah.
lines. Those are deep, deep, deep listening lines there. Chasms, if you will. The CEO in the room is just as likely to be the person whose pet or spouse or whatever comes crashing through the internet call as much as whoever else, the intern who's on the call. And
Right.
that's actually what I love is whether you like it or not, we are all just humans. And if there is one tiny sliver of value in what is happening right now in the world, at least in, and I always feel like I have to say this, this is a pretty privileged version of the conversation to even be having here because this really does level on survival, both from a medical
Yeah.
standpoint as well as an economic standpoint for a lot of people. But those very real and very deep problems aside, there is something really important and foundational, and I hope maybe even transformational about this weird story that we have perpetuated on and on and on in business where you're always supposed to have it together. As we've said a million times, like I said, this is why we started this podcast, is we hated the fact that anything other than everything is great was kind of taboo. And nobody, nobody on the planet can even pretend that everything is great right now. Not even
No,
for
so
5 minutes.
right. So you've eliminated that. So, and I never would have, I really never would have, before this whole thing started, reached out to a client other than those who are my friends for just saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Because they would say, "We're doing well. Why? Why is our
Why are you
lawyer asking
asking?
us, what? Do you know
Do you know
something? Did you
something
get
we
served
don't?
with something? Did you, you know, but now, and I'm not generally the kind of person that would send out saying, so here's what's going on in my life and do a couple paragraphs,
Yeah.
not to, but, but the response that I've gotten from people who are not people that I go out with socially, but they're clients, just talking about how everything isn't great. They're saying, look, we're healthy. One email that I got earlier today, as a matter of fact, we're healthy, thankfully, but we're stuck in a hotel room because we had just happened to have some mold remediation in our house. So
Oh,
we had to be out of our house. And so now we're in a hotel room for what looks like months. And our dog is in a kennel because this hotel doesn't allow dogs. And so we're
yeah.
trying to do whatever. But she never would have um, given her little
Right.
story of what's happening completely unbidden to me. And
That,
it would have
yes.
seen a sign of weakness. It would have seen as some sort of break. Well, I'll do that to my best friends, but I mean, we like each other. We're professional acquaintances, but no, why would I tell Elliot that? I mean, he's not one of the people in my life like that. But now it's perfectly okay, and I was really happy she did, and we could talk about that.
Yeah, there's like this scaled intimacy. And I think what's really interesting, and I'm such an intimacy junkie. I'm very happy about all this. But here's a really fascinating thing. Over and over, there's like I'm going to try and write these things down because I feel like it's some things that I want to start sharing a little more broadly because I don't see them getting talked about as much. But one of the things that I have had to reinsert into many, many, many of the conversations that I've had this week is just this exact topic. Don't forget that you're talking to a human. Like just do not underestimate the value of just simply saying, how are you? Like, I just wanted to see, like, how are you? Because that has been my opening line. Like, how are you? Like, what's going on for you? Where are you in all this? There are some people who are kind of doing great. Like and then they feel weird about that because they're like, actually, this has been weirdly an opportunity, and that feels super, I'm guilty about that because, we've been able to like overserve people in a way that's like, will probably set us up, whatever. That feels weird. Other people have like layers and layers. I talked to a client a couple days ago, and I again just said, how are you? And just to check in with her. And the layers of what she's dealing with at the moment are hands down some of the more complex issues that I've heard anyone having to deal with right now. Of like, it just, obviously I'm not going to go into the details, but it was one of those like, oh, like, wow, I'm so glad I asked, because here's what I can tell you right now. Had I gone into, no matter how I worded it, no matter what I said, no matter what I did, there was not space in her brain because of everything that's going on in her life right now. And so many people, everyone is operating at a closer to survival. Maybe not everyone is down at a survival level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but everyone is 2 or 3 or 4 layers lower than where they were before.
No,
and
that's
that changes what you
absolutely
hear.
true. It changes what you hear. It also changes what you say, because
And what you care about and what you like.
There are those
everything.
people for whom things are going great. There's that small subset. But generally speaking, the answer when people say, so how you doing? My response, everybody has a patterned response, is I'm doing well, can't complain, what's going on with you? But I find that I can't be dismissive of that question.
Yes.
And I can't come back with a patterned, great, how are you doing? Because it's not true.
Stupid.
And it feels stupid.
It feels gross.
It's
like
wrong, because people would stop at that. It used to be just this pass by. It's an entree into the conversation that you want to have. But now the conversation you want to have is really, how are you? So
yes. So it took like the appetizer and it made it the entree.
Correct. So now people are saying, how are you? If I say great, I'm really, first of all, I'm not respecting the conversation or the inquiry. No. And they're going to dismiss the rest of it. Like, why aren't you talking to me? You can't be doing great. Nobody's doing great.
Nope.
So
nobody's
how are
doing
you?
great.
So how are
right.
you? Well,
and if you are doing great, and if that was authentic, if you really are doing great, you wouldn't say it that way.
You wouldn't say it that way.
Weirdly, this is actually a kind of good time for me. Like, you would say it in a very different. So it wasn't an authentic great.
No, so there was, and it reminds me of that line in the old movie Broadcast News from the late 90s. William Hurt and Holly Hunter.
Yeah.
And William Hurt asked Albert Brooks, what do you do when your real life exceeds your dreams? And Albert Brooks says, keep it to yourself. And that's really the thing. So if you are doing great, you tend to keep it to yourself. Right, but for the most part, people, I do want to know. I want to know how these people are doing. What's going on? How has this changed their lives? Are they healthy? Is their family healthy? And frankly, in a business relationship, I hoped everything was fine, but I never really expected a deep answer to that.
Right.
I expected, I'm doing fine. How are you?
If on the other side of this, whatever this is and however long it takes, if we actually end up at something where some amount of authentic humanity remains in the soup of whatever business looks like, I think that will be a good thing. I think there's some value to be had from that.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village,
Yes, it does.
we'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky
Ooh,
team.
yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Including wrangling us.
Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.